Shabbat Shalom and welcome this morning. So good to see you and be with you. I'm going to start with a reading from my book, Heart of Light. It's called Tidal Pool, and it sort of reflects a topic, a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. Everything returns back to the source. The challenges of life swept away with the tide. Survival is connected with the flow of the waters, regenerated and renewed with each breath in silence. We strive and we work until we are loved, and yet within ourselves lies the true source of strength. The ebb and flow, the constant world of change is what motivates our struggle to find our way through the pain. Under the surface, bubbling possibility, ever changing, ever beckoning, every changing, ever beckoning. Embrace the flow, discover the light of truth, the deepest pool of self-knowing. And here's the art that goes with this.
Who does your art?
This is by Julie Silver, the famous American Jewish songwriter and song leader. And she did all of the art in the book. And it mentions the tides, and the tides are connected with our calendar, with the sun and the moon and the flow. And I feel very connected to nature. So I'm going to teach you a song. And if you take one of those sheets, you'll be able to follow the song, because this song is all about the Jewish calendar. And I apologize, I don't have one to put up to share screen with you because I did not scan this. Maybe I,
Can you just
no,
hold it up so they can see?
yes, I can, but it won't do much good if, hold on, I want to hold a better copy
I'll
out.
fake it.
Yeah, you could bring, you can probably find this on the internet. That's where I found it. It's the Hebrew calendar, and it's a round version of the Hebrew calendar. And it mentions all the seasons and all of the months and all the holidays. And that's what we're going to start talking about. But first, of course, I'm going to teach you a song, because music is the way in. You know, music is the way in. Besides saying a blessing for Torah, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. As we struggle sort of with these words of Torah, consecrate this. Nisan Iyar Sivan Tammuz
Lost the sound.
Tishrei Cheshvan Kislev Tevet Shvat Adar Rucha Chadeshet Koleit, a sliver, a quarter, a half then full light, revealing yourself in the darkness of night. Here's the chorus, and it's really easy. And we go round and round and round, and we go round and round, and we go round and round and round, and we go round and round. This is the cycle, the rhythm of time. Days turn to weeks, and the months into years, and we go round and round and round, and we go round and round, revealing the mysteries that set us up. Whoops, a sliver, a quarter, a half then full light, revealing the mysteries that set us apart. And we go round and round and round, and we go round and round. The winter, awakening in spring. Light kisses the summer, igniting the fall. And we go round and round and round. And we go round and round. A sliver, a quarter, a half, then a whole. Kodesh, your presence is touching our soul, and we go round and round and round, and we go round and round. It is new, it is ours, we see it again, revealing yourself in the darkness of night, and we go round and round and round, and we go round and round. Yes. And
That's
that
really a beautiful song for me with the round version of the Hebrew calendar.
it is, but it's very appropriate to what we're going to study today. And that setting, by the way, is by Debbie Friedman, and Tamara Cohen wrote the poem, so it was a collaboration. And it is beautiful, and we'll probably come back to it, and hopefully maybe I can sing it correctly the next time. I think I can. It's growing on me. So Jews often say the holidays are late this year, right? Or the holidays are early this year. I mean, this year, the holidays are sort of late. I mean, they're the end of September into October. That's not too late. In fact, the holidays are never early or never late. They're always right on time, according to the Jewish calendar.
That's true.
Right? Unlike the Gregorian or the civil calendar, which is based on the sun or the solar, the Jewish calendar is based primarily on the moon, the lunar calendar, with periodic adjustments made to account for the differences between the solar and lunar cycles. So last night I noticed after we got out of synagogue, that gorgeous, almost full moon, okay? And it was so beautiful. And it reminded me that in ancient days, that's how they knew where they were in the cycle, by the cycle of the moon. That's how they knew. I mean, they had calendars, obviously, but their calendars were kept in cycle with that moon. So the Jewish calendar might be described as both solar and lunar. Actually, the moon takes an average of 29 and a half days to complete its cycle. 12 lunar months equal 354 days. A solar year is 365 and a quarter days. There's a difference of 11 days per year. So to ensure that the Jewish holidays always fall in the proper season, an extra month is added to the Hebrew calendar 7 times out of every 19 years. 7 times in 19 years, an extra month is added. And we're going to talk about that month in a moment. If this wasn't done, the fall harvest festival of Sukkot, for instance, would sometimes be celebrated in the summer, right? Or the spring holiday of Passover would sometimes occur in winter. But as you'll hear from the text that I brought today, it's primarily surrounding Passover that the issues lie. Passover must be celebrated in the spring. It cannot, it just has to be. And there's a reason for that, because it's actually the first month of the year, of the Jewish year. Rosh Hashanah is not. The month that Pesach occurs is the first year of the Jewish calendar, and we'll talk about that in a second. So Jewish days are reckoned from sunset to sunset rather than from dawn or midnight. The basis for this is biblical. In the story of creation, each day concludes with the phrase, and there was evening and there was morning a first day, Vayhi erev, vayhi boker yom echad, and it goes on from there. Since evening is mentioned first, the ancient rabbis concluded that in a day, evening precedes the morning, right? Evening precedes the morning. I mean, why do you think that was? I've always been curious about it, about why evening precedes the morning. What's happening in the evening, for example, when the sun goes down, what's happening? In ancient days, it gets dark. So what did they do? Yeah, they slept while it was dark. So their day started when they went to bed. And then they woke up with the sun, and that they could go through their day, and that was the conclusion of their day. So instead of starting the day in the morning and then sleeping half of it, they would sleep and then get up and work and do their day, and then they would sleep again. That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. And in the Jewish calendar and in Jewish life, everything starts in the evening. Think about when Shabbat ends. Saturday night, how many stars need to show before we can go out and do work? 3 stars have to be visible in the sky before Shabbat is officially over. Yes, so that's important to remember. So when we're talking about doing events, especially like a wedding or a major event, I mean, Reform Judaism, we can fudge it a little bit, but the Orthodox, during the summer months, it stays lighter a lot longer. So you wouldn't have Havdalah till 8:39, and then 3 stars in the sky, then you could do work. Okay, in the winter months, much different. Sun goes down 4:35. So it's a completely different cycle depending on the flow of the moon, the sun, the stars, and everything. Thus the circle, the cyclical. So the list of the Hebrew months and the holidays that occur during these months also indicate the corresponding secular months. So let's go through this calendar a little bit, okay? Where do we start? Well, let's find Nisan. Nisan is actually underneath the Yom HaShoah on the left. If you had a colorful one, I just didn't have the color to do all of this, but Nisan is on the left. Nisan is when Passover, that's the first month of the Jewish calendar. So technically it's when our calendar year begins. Michael, did you have a comment? You can stay unmuted.
No, I was talking to him.
Lynn was
sorry.
talking to me off the screen.
Okay, that's fine. If you have a comment, just raise your hand and have you.
Okay.
So
Thank
Nisan is usually in the month of March or April. And what is the holiday that's associated with that? It says, yeah. No, not yet. No, we're not there yet. So Nisan, we have Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, counting of the Omer, Pesach. Yeah, this is very, very confusing. I'm looking at a different one, and in this one, Nisan is definitely first before Yom HaShoah. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it's not. I'm sorry. I'm not reading this correctly. Yes, Pesach begins what? What happens after Pesach? The second day of Pesach, we begin to count the Omer. And how many days of the Omer?
49.
49, 7 weeks, 7 days, 49. Very good. And each day in the Omer is associated with a different quality of the Sfirot. And I do this whole Omer counting thing during that time and and I do a lot of yoga surrounding that, but we can talk more about that. So we have Pesach, we have the counting of the Omer, we have Yom HaShoah, okay, in Nisan. So what's the next one? Going to the right. Iyar. So in Iyar, and this is all looks like the spring to me. In Iyar, we have Yom HaZikaron, which, you know, is a modern holiday, but because of the state of Israel. Yom HaAtzmaut, which is also a very modern holiday. And another one that's not listed on here, Lag BaOmer.
Oh, yeah.
Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is when they make all the bonfires in Israel, and it's during the Omer, but it's it's at a certain date of the Omer, and there are lots of traditions surrounding that, mainly in the land of Israel. And it signifies that Shavuot is very close. The end of the time is close, and Shavuot is coming. So where does Shavuot fall? In Sivan. So Shavuot is in Sivan. That's the giving of the Torah. And if you think about it, our people, you know, we left Egypt. There's the Pesach, right? We left Egypt. We counted this Omer, and we were counting. There were 49 days until we received the Torah. And all this other stuff happened during that time. 7 weeks. 7 weeks doesn't seem like an awful long time. But you know, considering I was supposed to come here 4 weeks ago, and we were raging in the pandemic pretty hard, and now we seem to have turned a corner. Even 4 weeks can be a long time. So 7 weeks to the Israelites in the desert.
That was
Right.
forever.
Well, it could be. But I mean, my question is, have you ever felt like you were in a place where a little bit of time just felt like forever?
Yeah, sure. Not so much recently. Time seems to be going.
Every day.
Every day. Exactly. Time goes out forever.
I'm gonna make
You know,
this the longest
I
holiday.
feel that time is going by faster. During the pandemic, things seemed slower, but now it's just like 4 weeks ago, we had our Zoom together. And I'm thinking, gosh, in 7 weeks, the Israelites went from Egypt to receiving the 10 Commandments. And all of a sudden we became a people. Gewalt. You know, I mean, how does that happen? I think it's a really good indication that a lot of stuff can happen in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely.
I mean, your life can change just like that in the blink of an eye.
We see that around us all the time.
Mhm, mhm. So, okay, so then we move on to the next month. Now Tammuz is great because it's usually June or July. There are no Jewish holidays in June or July of our calendar. Yay, that's when all the rabbis and cantors go on vacation. That's why it's such a good time. We have our conferences, we go hiking, you know, yeah. So, but then we're getting into the next month, which is Av, okay? And during the month of Av, we have Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of Av. It's Tisha, which means 9. Tisha, Tesha is the word Tisha B'Av. So it's just a grammatical thing. So Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. So what happened on the 9th of Av? Michael, do you know? Unmute. Yeah.
I forgot.
That's a good answer. Does anybody know?
It was something bad because it's a fast day.
It's good answer. See, that's what I like to hear. Yeah, so something bad. The temple was destroyed.
Oh,
on the
right.
9th of Av.
Thank you.
That was a
Yeah,
big
but
bad.
it's not supposed to forget.
It's early in the morning.
Have another cup of coffee, Michael. Yeah, cheers. Yes, the 9th of Av, the great temple in Jerusalem was destroyed. Great day of mourning, a fasting day, tragedy. But on that day, we also commemorate lots of bad stuff that's happened to the Jews. Not just that, but the expulsion. We've already, we know we have the Shoah, but anything bad. And there's a special book that we read on the 9th of Av, on Tisha B'Av, the Book of Lamentations. And Lamentations is very lamentful. But from that book, there's great resources and great wealth of beautiful texts that we still study today. And there's also a special trope melody for Lamentations, and it's very, mournful, as you can imagine, and very, very sad. But it's an opportunity that I've used to not only study Lamentations, but do a deep dive into the traumatic history of our people, because that trauma really has stayed with us when you think about it. Through epigenetics, whatever the history of each of our families is, we go all the way back to not only the Exodus, the receiving the 10 commandments, but then the destruction of the temple and everything that we had, or we thought. We were all sold into slavery. Babylon, the rabbis, they were all taken away. Everything was destroyed. The Romans took over first, then later the temple was rebuilt by the Babylonians, who kind of came in and made a puppet government of the second temple, and then it was destroyed again. So, but during that time, the exile in Babylonia, and right after that is when the Torah was codified. So lots of good came out of that destruction as well. So there's the good and the bad. Not that we would have wanted it destroyed, but everything has its purpose, exactly.
And confirmation at the other end.
Why God didn't protect the Jewish people so that the temple would not be destroyed?
Well, Jeremiah was a prophet. Jeremiah was not a bullfrog, by the way. He might have been. But first, there was Jeremiah the prophet. And Jeremiah the prophet saw what was going on and said to them, hey, guys, if you don't get your stuff to get your shiitake mushrooms together, as we say on the tennis court, if you don't get your shiitake mushrooms together, you're going to lose it all. And they knew it. But I personally don't, in theology of God, I don't believe God could have prevented that, because it was really outside forces who came in and took the temple from the Babylonians and the Jews and occupied it yet again. So I don't think there's anything God could have done. Now, Judah Maccabee was pretty fierce, and Judah held off a great Assyrian army through, we think of Hanukkah as a big holiday in this country now, but it's really a very minor holiday. And it comes from a civil war that was going on in Israel at the time through the Greeks and the Jews. They tried to make it work, but eventually the Greeks wanted the Jews to stop practicing religion and take on all the idols again. And so finally, this small band of rebels waged war, and that war lasted for 7 years, at least 7. I think it might be 10. It wasn't until the very end that they were victorious. And I believe, like it says in the song Maoz Tzur, that God helped us do that because it was the strength of our faith inside. And I think tying it back with Jeremiah, what Jeremiah was saying is we'd lost our faith. We were already praying to other gods. We weren't really following the commandments anymore. We were doomed. And that's what happened. We lost our mitzvot. We lost our core. We lost our center. We lost our way. And in a lot of ways, we could say some of us are facing the same challenges today. How are we going to keep the synagogue as a viable gathering place in the center for our worship? Well, we have to, be very strong and faithful in our devotion, not only to God, but to ourselves and our community. And I think that's what Jeremiah was saying. And it didn't work. So the building got bought, it dissolved and we were dispersed among all the nations, Yama, V'Kedma, Tzafona, V'Negba, north, south, east, and west. We went everywhere. And that's how Judaism dispersed throughout the world. That's how we came to be here. Purpose? I don't know. Beshert? Well, we'll see. Okay, where are we at? We're good. So so that's Av, Tisha B'Av. So let's go to Elul. Elul is August and September. Now, Elul, again, nothing happens in Elul. There's no real holiday, but this is what Elul is all about. And you're going to be learning a lot with me about this in the future. Elul is the preparation for the high holy days. All during the month of Elul, we sound the shofar. We'll be sounding the shofar in August of Elul when I'm here. And we prepare spiritually for the days of awe. So how do we do that? Anybody have any things that they do to get ready for clean house? Pesach, we do that too, but yes, clean house. What?
Cook.
I was gonna say that, Michael.
We do, but that's cook. Of course, we have to cook. We get ready. We have our, I mean, in the olden days, we'd be cooking for so many people. We'd be prepping and cooking and making. And today, we're lucky if we have, just us. But yeah, so we're cooking. But technically, in Judaism, what we do is something called cheshbon hanefesh. Cheshbon hanefesh is we take accounting of our soul. How do we take an accounting of the soul?
Think back about all the things you've done for the year.
Think back about all the things that has happened this year. What else?
Ask for forgiveness.
Ask for forgiveness.
Sorry,
Yeah,
that's me.
Yes, I ask for forgiveness. Elul is the month that we have to do a good scrub of our spirit. We're really fleshing out and flossing everything. How do we purge all that stuff so that we can go clean into Yom Kippur? And we'll talk about that in a minute. Cheshbon hanefesh. So there's many, many ways that we can do cheshbon hanefesh. There's like a list of like 56 things, which I'm going to share with you when we do a study in Elul. And I think it's indicative of who we are as a people. Like, how do people, how do we do this? There are many ways. It's not just forgiveness. It's not just cooking. There are many, many ways that we examine our personalities, for example. How did we hit the mark? How did we miss the mark? And one of the things I hope to do during this holiday is that we're going to write down on little pieces of paper how we hit the mark, how we might have missed the mark. They're anonymous, and we'll put them in a basket. And then when we get to when we do the Alchet, Atavo Lefanecha, I will read those out to the congregation. And this is something that I've done for years, and it's very powerful, but we have to figure out, where could I do better? Now, Musar is the study of our personality traits. Have you heard of Musar before?
No.
Oh boy,
Learned so much.
young grasshoppers. Oh, Musar is a Kabbalistic study of personality traits. And there are 18 midot. There are 18 personality traits that we look at to see how are we going to modulate these. And it's anything, the whole spectrum of our personalities, okay, from anger to greediness to how do we be more present to time management to Seymour. I know you don't have that problem. Excellent at that. But some of us do. So all of these midot, we study them during the month of Elul. That's a big job, because in order to get ready cheshbon hanefesh during the high holy days, we have to do our cleaning, and that is not in the house, that is in the spirit. So the cleaning up of the spirit. And then that prepares us for Tishrei. Tishrei is the month of the high holy days, and it includes Slichot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Simchat Torah. So you see, as we're going through, it has nothing to do with September, October. During the month of Tishrei, these holidays happen every year. Now, in our year, they change, but in this cycle, they never change. And in the ancient days, they wouldn't have changed because they didn't have a Gregorian calendar. Well, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So we have Slichot. Slichot is the formal beginning of the High Holy Day season. That's where I'll introduce all the music. We'll start the readings. We'll begin Cheshbon HaNefesh on that night. We'll change the Torah covers. We'll sound the shofar. We hear Avinu Malkeinu for the first time. You know, all of that good stuff, all that rich stuff. And then we move into Rosh Hashanah, which is a very joyous holiday because it says it's the first of the year, the head of the year, but in the Jewish calendar, it's really this came from Torah. On a certain day of Tishri, first day of Tishri, we would celebrate Rosh Hashanah. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. And then during the 10 days of repentance, leading up to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, of course, is a fasting day. So why do we fast on Yom Kippur?
Is that to help you get more in touch with your inner thoughts and feelings?
Sure. That's one answer. Anybody have any other ideas?
Purification,
Purification.
atoning.
Yeah, because we were told it's a mitzvah. And we wear white. That's to signify that purification. But in Kabbalistic tradition, Yom Kippur, we fast in order to understand what it means. I'm going to just say it. Understand what it means to die. We're simulating death.
Simulating what?
Suffering.
We're suffering. We're coming close to death. This is, our people's DNA. We suffered a lot. And the rabbis wanted to make sure we didn't forget where we came from.
Can't forget that suffering.
We can't forget that. We have to experience that. Why? B'chol dor vador, chayav adam et atzmo, ki'ilu hu yatsa mi Mitzrayim. In every generation, we must remember that we were slaves who left Egypt. We came out of Egypt. This happened to us, not them, us, which is what we say at the Seder. But on Yom Kippur, that's where the rubber hits the road. We've got to get close. And then by the time we get to Nila, we really do feel like we're going to die. And then we're reborn because we have orange juice and honey cake, and then what happens from that death, we go straight into Sukkot, which is our celebration of the harvest. What a wonderful, beautiful holiday and all the abundance of that. And then the happiest holiday of all, Simchat Torah. We march around with the Torahs. We have such an amazing time. It's just joyous. So we go from death to rebirth to life. And what does that remind us of?
Yeah.
And we go round and round and round, and we go round and round. And it really does bring us back to that lunar cycle. It's just a cycle. And then I want to remind you of one more thing. During the High Holy Days, we roll the Torah, roll, roll, roll. Now in Simchat Torah, we roll it all the way from the back, all the way to the beginning. Again, the cycle with the circles, right? So this is a circular faith in many ways. It's a circular faith. And when we think about ancient days, you think about a big bonfire and everybody around in a circle. It makes a lot of sense because they were looking at the stars, the moon, the sun, and all of those spheres, and in Egyptian idols as well, all the gods, all those spheres made it into our history. Was very important. The one big difference is we're the first people who carried our gods with us, our God in us. In ancient days, every people had their own God. And in Egypt, they had many, many gods. But Abraham was the first Jew who said, We don't care about your God or your God or your God. We got a God right here, Beinenu, inside of us. And like I was talking about that pillar, that the pillar of smoke and the pillar of fire where God's presence was, that's kind of how we got through it, because everyone felt God's presence as we went through that guide through the desert, and God was guiding us through. It just that was how we got that feeling that God cannot be seen, but we see this presence, and we see Moses's face, which was sunburned from God's presence. But you can't look at God. You have to look away. You have to look away. It's too bright. It would be like we were going towards the sun and we looked right in, we would die. And that's what the message was when Moses went up the mountain the second time. God says, you cannot see my face. If you saw my face, you would die. So Moses turned away. Even in that moment, he was filled with such ecstasy that he had this radiance, this glow. And what would it be like for us to, for each of us to feel that? I kind of feel like that's what each Jew is trying to get back to. I think that's why we go to synagogue, why we want music, why we want learning, why we want the holidays, because we want to get back to that feeling that we turned away from God, but we want to feel that presence so strongly. At least that's how I feel. So we get through the holidays, we get through Tishri, then we get to a breather, Cheshvan. That's another month that the rabbis and cantors go on vacation because there's no holidays. And every year I always see on my Facebook feed or whatever that everyone's saying, thank God now I can take a week off, or I get a breather because there's no holidays coming up. We just get a little break until one of my favorite months, Kislev, Hanukkah. Now let's talk about Hanukkah for a second. We touched upon it, the revolt of the Maccabeans. Now that revolt was when they rededicated the temple. They went into the temple, they cleaned it, they rededicated, they lit the eternal light, and there's this myth that that the oil burned for 8 days and nights. There's that number 8 again. Remember we were talking about the bris?
Mhm.
Well, here's the thing, that there are many theories about the miracle of the oil, and we'll talk about more about this during Hanukkah. But the real miracle was that they did find a little cruse of oil, and the next day they expected when they came that the light would be out, and it was still going. And then they came and they thought the light would be out, but it was still going. And they came, and it wasn't like they're lighting menorah, they're lighting the eternal light. Okay, it's a little bit of oil. And then so maybe this is mega oil. Maybe Elon Musk, created this oil. I don't know. Or maybe it was God, or maybe it was a miracle. But whatever they did, they each day they came back after they had left, and they expected it to be gone, and it lasted another night. And after 7 days, they said, oh, that's it. But that was all for the people. That was for the people who were experiencing that. They felt that miracle. The eighth night, the rabbis say, is the only significant night of Hanukkah. And why? Because 8th night is when God was the one who felt the miracle. God became the miracle. That the people were in their regular days and they had Shabbat, but on the 8th night, it was like, okay, this is the holy flame that is ignited, that I'm going to ignite inside these people. And God came down and touched us. And that's how this holiday became so significant. It wasn't the 7 days, it was on the 8th night. And I'm going to bring a really detailed teaching about this so you can experience that through some text that we do. There's a rabbi who wrote about this subject, and it's so moving to hear about how on the 8th day is, and that's significant for the bris, because we have a bris on the 8th day. Also, there are 8 days on Simchat Torah we celebrate. They get the giving of Torah. So 8 is a really significant number in Judaism. So Hanukkah is a wonderful holiday. Then Tevet, December and January, we got nothing.
Are you taking?
No, I'm maybe taking a vacation, a little tiny vacation. Shvat, we just came through Shvat, and a wonderful holiday, Tu B'Shvat. On Tu B'Shvat, we have Hag HaIlanot. That is the holiday of the trees. And what a beautiful holiday. Can you imagine a holiday of the trees? It's the new year of the trees. Now, I can't imagine it's the new year of the trees where I live because there's still snow on the ground. But remember, this is ancient Israel we're talking about. That's when they planted trees, because that's when they took root the best, I guess. I guess you were telling me about the bris when the 8th day, they discovered that the blood would coagulate better on the 8th day. Well, on Tu B'Shvat, they discovered that the trees would grow best if they dug them in on that holiday. And that's what they did. And also they celebrated all of the special grains that are special, that are significant in the land of Israel. The grains and fruits. Have you ever done a Tu B'Shvat Seder?
No.
Yeah.
Oh, it's to die for.
Don't
Like,
they call that like the second Passover?
yes, yeah. And you do it with dates and figs and fruit of all kinds, and then the grains and barley and they call it the 7 species, which I don't know off the top of my head, but these are the 7 species that grow in the land of Israel. So we celebrate all of that growth and that rebirth until finally we get to the holiday that we have coming up, and that last month is Adar. That's the month that we're in right now, but we're not actually in Adar. We are in Adar, but we're in Adar Rishon. Adar Rishon, because this year is a leap year and we have 2. Okay, 2 Adars. So for the let's see. Okay, for the counting of months, Nisan, the month that begins spring, is considered the first. We talked about that. Nisan is the first. However, the Jewish year is reckoned from the month of Tishri, the month that begins autumn. This would seem to be the superimposition of one calendar system upon another. Yes, which took place during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century before the Common Era. Long, long ago, there was a little bit of a switch. According to Jewish tradition, history is reckoned from the time of creation. Jewish years, therefore, are numbered from then, 5,769, or wherever we're at right now, 82. Thank you. For instance, Israel declared its independence on 5 ER 5708, corresponding to May 14th, 1948. The year 5708 and every Jewish year was figured by commencing the count from the beginning of Genesis. So these years that we're in is counting from the beginning of Genesis, which I guess is when people started counting time. It may not be when the world was created, but it is when people, I guess, the ancient people started counting time. Because actually, if Abraham lived, is about 3,000 years. So when you think about that, there was a long time before he even became the first Jew. Well, Christian custom has been to divide history into 2 periods, as we know. Before the time of Jesus is called BC. Now we use before the Common Era. I mean, that's more common. And after Jesus's birth is called AD, Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord. Jewish books generally refer to these periods as BCE and CE. Okay, the subject of the calendar is really complex. Obviously, we're just kind of touching on it, but I think it's interesting to set up some of the learnings that we can do in the future. So why do we have Adar Sheni, which is we have 5 minutes, but I'm going to get to it. Why do we have Adar Sheni? Why do we have the first Adar and a second Adar? Okay, so there's a problem. We know that Pesach has to be in the spring, But by going by the lunar calendar, this is not always possible within the lunar calendar. Solution: we add an extra month of every few years of the month of Adar. And this aligns the solar and the lunar calendar.
But does that mean there are two Pesachs?
No.
Adar, the filler is
It's
another
always
free month?
it's always Adar 1, and in Adar 1, we don't really do anything. So a leap year is a year in which another month has been added, and we're in a leap year right now. And we only ever add an Adar and make two Adars, Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni. Why do we do this? Because of the springtime, so that Passover will fall at that time, as it is said in Deuteronomy. Guard the month of spring. That is the month that this month should be in the spring. And if it wasn't for the addition of this month, Passover would sometimes come in the days of the sun, this summer, and sometimes in the days of the rain, the winter. We have to modify the calendar so Pesach will fall during the spring. That's why we do this, folks. That is actually why. Let's see. Is there any other teaching? This is all from, all these teachings are from Safaria. Pardon?
Quick question.
Yes, could I get a water, please? Wait, no, I have one. And I have to drink it before I go through security, so I'll just drink this. Yes, please.
Why is there so little written in any of the text to cover the period between Jacob and Abraham? 400 years.
What do you mean, Jacob? Abraham was first.
No, and Moses, I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean Joseph and Moses? Yeah, because we were slaves in Egypt. That's why. All of that stuff happened. Then we went into Egypt, and Joseph was the Pharaoh guy.
Right.
And then we were all, then Joseph died and we were enslaved and we became a numerous people. But our history then picks up when Moses becomes a prophet.
So I guess up until the time Moses becomes a prophet, nobody practiced, none of the people who were there practiced being a Hebrew.
No, they were living in Egypt enslaved, so they had to follow the Egyptian laws and customs.
So nobody was circumcised. I presume.
I don't know.
Well, didn't they have to all get circumcised?
Yeah, I think they were practicing in secret. Yeah, that's how Moses became, that's how we ended up having all of the whole Pesach, because the Hebrews were isolated and they were practicing their own customs. It's just that for some reason or another, the rabbis decided not to add any of those stories in, presuming that this was a history that was told orally from generation to generation to generation to generation. At one point, and we can do a whole class about this if you want to, and I could even teach it on Zoom, is who wrote the Bible, because there are actually 4 writers of the Torah, and the first 4 books were written way before the 5th book was written. The 5th book was written in Jeremiah's time, before the destruction of the Second Temple. The first 4 books were written much prior to that and not codified until Babylonia. And all of that, and there are different names, and there's a wonderful book called Who Wrote the Bible, and it's really easy to understand. We can read it, we can analyze, we can go in, and then you'll be able to understand it. How do they know about the different writers? Because of the language they used to describe God, for one thing, and the stories that were told. Maybe there was another writer of Torah and the stories from Egypt didn't make it in. There was a final didactation of the Torah, and a lot of it got put on the cutting room floor. Some of it was found in Qumran. A lot of it became the Haftarah, which is our history after, and the other books that we study, like Esther and Lamentations and Numbers and all of those, became the writings. But a lot of them were lost.
That would be fascinating.
I took 2 years class on that, and I really haven't had the opportunity to teach it. So I would love to do. That's how I know a lot of the history of what happened at the temple and stuff, because I took Jewish history and then I took a history of Torah. And of course, they intersect. There's an amazing book by Friedman called The Question of the Exodus. And the question is, was there an Exodus? Was there really an Exodus?
Is anyone on Zoom besides Michael and Lynn?
No,
I think what you're doing now and what you're talking about, our congregation would love.
Sounds like Michelle.
So
Can't hear the questions.
maybe less than usual, which is what we're phenomenal for. But
Are you
your
muted?
action to us right now is what our synagogue needs.
great. So let's so that's why we're doing this.
Could you repeat the question? We can't hear it.
Yeah. She's saying that your congregation would love us, so we should do more of this. So my suggestion is that this recording is going to be up on the YouTube channel. I hope that when folks see this teaching, that you'll consider joining us on Saturday morning for this study.
I think it should be part of Friday night.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Because of the commute and so many people that don't want to do that.
Yeah, so perhaps we'll do a study session about Torah and who wrote the Torah. I think it would be great to have a class that we did as an ongoing study. So, Shabbat, we study, we celebrate, and study of Torah is also really important. And I think that that's bears talking about. So before we end, because I want to be conscious of time, let's sing our song again. And maybe you'll, as we go, so why do we have two Adars?
Because we need to, and we need to have Passover in the spring.
That's right, because we need to have Passover in the spring.
No
And
crust on the pumpkin.
Exactly, and we're cooking a lot too, so we need that. By the way, Purim, the fast of Purim and Shushan Purim, which we're going to celebrate, always occurs in this Adar Sheni. It cannot occur in Adar Rishon. And there's another thing that happens on Adar Rishon. In Adar Rishon, you're not allowed to, I didn't get to this text part, but you're not allowed to give eulogies or sermons. I'm not sure why, but it was there's a Mishnah that says in the Talmud that you're not supposed to give eulogies or sermons. I think that that's a good thing. And Purim always, and if you read the Megillah during Adar 1 Rishon, you have to read it again on the designated Purim date. So we're going to be doing that when I get back. Yes.
Real quick,
Mhm.
in our preparation for the High Holy Days in August, whatever that month is, isn't there a time prior to that you cannot get married?
Yes.
And is it because I never?
Yes,
heard of-
it's because you're not supposed to raise a chuppah
Uh-huh.
or do music or anything like that.
During
And
that solemn period.
yeah, there's a solemn period where you can't do that. It might even be during the Omer, but I have to look. I used to know all this stuff very, very well, but I can't remember what those dates are. But there is a period of time you're not supposed to raise a chuppah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
except on Lag BaOmer.
yeah, and Lag BaOmer, yes, but I don't think it has something to do between Pesach and Shavuot, which seems like a long time to me because that's 7 weeks. So let me check the fact on that.
That's good.
And I'll
I'm
get
just
back to,
curious.
no, you're right, but there's a special name for that period and now it just went out of my head. And I know that because I do a lot of weddings, so I have to be aware if there's somebody who's more observant, you can. Well, yeah, I could say that you're not supposed to, but I normally would, they know that if they're not supposed to get married, you know. There you go. Sivania, Nisania, Sivan Tammuz, Avelu Tishrei Cheshvan, Kislev Tevet, Shvat Adar, Brucha Hamdesheshe Kolei, a sliver, a quarter, a half, then full light, revealing yourself in the darkness of night. And we go round and round and round, and we go round and round, and we go round and round and round, and we go round and round. Thanks for being with us today and hope to see you soon.
Shabbat
Bye.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
See you in a month.
Shabbat shalom. Shalom. Bye.